Welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Hey Tesh, could you please go ahead and share the deck again? Thank you. Welcome everybody. We'll get started in just a couple more minutes. Hello everyone. Welcome to our DocuSign Developer webinar, Web Forms API. My name is Melissa Marsh from our Developer Programs Marketing team. I'll be moderating and running our backroom logistics today. Next slide, please. I'm here with Hitesh Davaria, lead software engineer, and Pranav Gupta, senior software engineer, who will be presenting and demoing, along with Cole Kleinstuber, senior developer support engineer, who will address questions via the Q&A box throughout the session and after the demo when we open up the floor to questions. Next slide, please. One more. Thank you. Oh, no, back one more. That. Yes, that one. Thank you. Before we get started, I have a few quick housekeeping items to go over. You are all placed in listen-only mode and this session is being recorded. You'll receive an email in about a week with a link to the webinar recording along with other resources. Please be sure to use the Q&A button to ask questions at any time. Feel free to ask questions as they occur to you and we'll answer via the Q&A box or let you know we'll answer them live after the demo. To copy and save your questions and answers, simply right-click on them and copy and save to your desktop or document. Next slide. Now, is this webinar right for you? Well, this is a webinar for developers. If you're not a developer, you're more than welcome to stay, or you can check out something a little less technical at DocuSign 101, which is events.docusign.com/DocuSign 101. And I will drop that into the chat for you now, in case you're interested. And next slide. Now, this is just our safe harbor notice. All of the values, email addresses, keys, secrets, tokens, and other personal information you might see here today are for demo purposes only and will be deleted or revoked after the webinar. Okay, you should see a quick poll on your screen in just a moment. If you can answer those questions, that will help us understand where you are in your development journey and enable us to customize content for this and future webinars. All right, that's it for the housekeeping. Let's go ahead and get started. Take it away, Hitesh. And I think you are muted.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Melissa. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. This is Hitesh, a lead software engineer at DocuSign. I'll give you a high-level overview of existing web forms and what's coming as part of advanced web forms capability we are launching in 22nd February. Along with me, like Pranav will cover demo parts of integrating web forms API. So let's get started with the basic feature we have for web forms and deep dive into advanced web forms capability. So what is web form? So it's a way of collecting data from the end user. So if you are like small size, medium size, or large enterprise customer, web forms can help to automate form filling experience. So I'll give you a small example of Telebank we are using as a part of demo. You can see I have created sample web forms here. This web forms helps Telebank to collect data from the end user. And you can see like we have all this validation with different component and all we are supporting like all checkbox, all kind of components here. So how did I created this web forms? So let me get into builder experience. Here you can see form step and I hope like most of you guys are familiar with this experience. So I won't go into detail, but just a basic experience. If I go to forms, it will give me a list of forms for this account for a given user. If I select all web forms, it will give me all the web forms for all the users under this account. And I was talking about this tele web account opening web forms configuration. So here is a quick example, like how we can create a web forms from the beginning. So you can see this is all my existing eSign template. I can select any template and create a web forms. So this is how this will create a web form configuration for a eSign template. And underneath, it will create a copy of a template. So this web form configuration is mapped with the eSign template, which is local to this web forms configuration. I'll go into detail in next slide. But here you can see Telebank example. We have already created this configuration. And here you can see I can get into public instance of this web form configuration. So this is the web forms we have right now. So current capability is like this is a one web form public instance which tie up with this web forms configuration. And you can see like anyone can access this web forms URL and anyone can fill out this data. And it doesn't have a pre-filled form configuration like pre-filled data for this web form instance. Here I can edit the web forms. For example, I have this checkbox. I can make it not required, save it. And I can activate this form. Once it's activated, I can open this form and I can see this is not required now. So I publish new version of this web forms. So this is how you can create a web forms and publish it. Let me show you another interesting part about component name. So if I go here and select this API reference name, so this is the name generated for this individual component. We will use this API reference name to pre-fill some of this form data. And Pranav will talk more about that. Let's go to next slide. So in this part, I have covered like high level overview of web forms component. You can see like e-signature template. This is where we select e-sign template and we create a web form configuration. So this generate configuration under web forms. At the same time, we create a web forms template, which is in sync with the e-sign template and in sync with the web forms configuration. The idea behind web forms template is like whenever you make a change in web forms configuration, it will get auto reflected to web forms template. And web form template will help us to create envelope. And here you can notice it has like 3 instances. So with advanced web forms capability, you can create n number of instances for a given web forms configuration, and which can be pre-filled and which is secure because it's protected by a unique token and which is unique to specific user. So here is current limitation we have with web forms capability. Here, like, as I said, customer can create only one public instance of web forms and which is accessible publicly. So it's not less secure. And we cannot embed this URL into our own application. For example, I have created these web forms. Now I have my own bank, Telebank. I don't have a way to integrate this API. So that's the reason, like, it's standalone. Like, I cannot, there is no way for me to integrate with my own banking solution. So with advanced web forms capability, here is small demo I have for advanced web forms capability. Yeah. So here you can see the header and footer, you can see it's configurable. I have my own bank logo, and here I can integrate my web forms instance, which is pre-filled. So let me go back to the home page. If I click this button, this will internally calls web forms API and which pass the data for a sign-in user. So user will see pre-filled experience. For remaining part, they fill out the form and they submit the instance. So this is how like advanced web forms capability can help for developers and end users. Now let's talk a little bit more about advanced web forms capability. So as I was showing you in a demo in the right side, this is the screen like internal like web forms instance is coming via API and which is part of embedded experience of this Tele portal. So here is like few advanced feature for web forms. So first one is like you can create a form instance that is secure and unique to a user session. You can also like programmatically pre-fill form instance via API. And you can find more details of all the APIs, publicly available APIs through this website. We can also like monitor web forms instance. It's initiated, in progress, sent, or submitted. In progress is coming soon, but it will be a part of save later feature. We'll be going to launch in Q1. And fourth one, like programmatically, you can retrieve submitted data of a web form instance. And as part of like DocuSign JS library, you can embed web forms instance to your own portal. Coming back to this slide, how can we integrate with web forms API? So first thing, like we have like 101 guide here. So this will give you in-depth knowledge of web forms 101, which has a different sections like web forms concept, authentication, how to guide, all the API reference, and the process to go live. So on the authentication part, you can, let's go back to slide. Here you can see like three existing mechanism we provide with e-signature API, which is authorization code grant, implicit grant, and JWT grant. With web forms, you can be leverage all these three mechanisms to integrate with web forms API. However, we have a 4 new additional scope which you need to require in order to generate access token. Web forms read, web forms write, which will help to read and write web forms configuration. For now, like just a web forms read, we are not going to launch any capability for now to where you can write web forms configuration programmatically, which is coming soon. For web forms instance, there's an additional 2 scope, instance read and instance write. Through that, you can read web form instance and create or update web forms instance. In addition to all these 4, you need to require pass like the signature scope, which is required to call all the web forms API. This is a base path for developers and production account. And here is how you can generate integrated key for your application. This is existing flow. Like you can go to apps and keys section of the settings page, and you can generate all your new integrated key, and you can configure like redirect URL and all the settings. And Pranav will take it from here to go deep dive into API and how your application can work in between end user and DocuSign API to create this customized experience. Pranav?
All right, thanks, Hitesh. One question before we move forward. I wasn't sure, and I apologize if I missed this. Did we cover the first slide that said what is a web form and what it's used for? We're starting to get questions about that.
Okay, so 1 second, let me go to question.
I think it's the like what is a web form? Yep, there we go. Could we cover that again real quick?
Yeah, sure. So web forms is like it's a way of collecting data from end users. So you can like any enterprise application can build their web forms based on their own requirement. If developers are familiar with this builder capability, they can come here and they can create a web forms. I don't know if they have a specific question about web forms, but in order to create a web forms, there are 2 ways to create web forms through DocuSign portal. One is through existing template, and the second one is standalone web forms. Existing template means if they have already eSign template, they can use eSign template to create a web forms. And the standalone, like they don't have an eSign template, but they just create web forms from the scratch with all the different components. And they can activate and publish the instance. And once the web forms is published, they can submit a form instance and generate envelope. Any specific question, Melissa, can see?
I think that they were wondering what they're used for.
Okay.
What is a web form used for?
Hi, I can jump in to answer this. Hi, I'm the product marketing manager for web forms. And so we created web forms really to focus on that data collection step of agreement processes. So for a lot of agreements, before they are actually ready to be signed, you kind of need to collect a series of information from signers. So for example, within a bank, when signers are signing up for loan applications or credit applications or opening accounts, they need to provide information like their personal data, how much of a loan they're applying for, and so on, and also like things like address, and so on. So historically, those form processes can be pretty clunky, especially when signers are asked to fill in a PDF form. So web forms really just creates this more interactive, mobile-friendly, dynamic, and responsive way for signers to be guided through this process so that they're not abandoning from that initial sign up or form filling stage before they even get to the signing ceremony. So that's kind of the use cases for web forms. We've seen this used across industries. Financial services is a huge one with the example use cases that I've just provided. We've also seen use cases in healthcare where people use them for, say, patient intake, as well as HR use cases for internal change requests, employee onboarding, and so on. But you can really think of this as a more interactive way and a step up in terms of that signer experience compared to a static PDF form.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Helen. I appreciate it. All right, and back to our regular scheduled programming. I think we'll go back to the slide where Pranav was going to pick up and present. Thanks, Hitesh and Helen.
All right. Thanks, Hitesh, for the insightful overview. Hello, everyone. My name is Pranav, and I'm a software engineer in DocuSign. I hope you all had a good weekend. So I'm going to demonstrate how Web Forms API work. Let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
And you're seeing the presentation slide, right?
Yes.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate how Web Form API work, and then we will open the floor for Q&A and discussion. Please feel free to share your thoughts and ideas on the topic at hand. And we welcome questions and look forward to engaging in an open discussion. And for the demonstration purpose, I'm going to use Postman tool to call our APIs, just to give you a flavor of the Web Forms API. So you can see this diagram. So here the step one, let's consider a scenario. We have a telebank that Hitesh just mentioned. So that telebank, let's say they uses DocuSign Web Forms API to collect data from their customer. In this case, your application is the bank, and end user, point number one, end user is the customer filling out the form. Before end user or customer, they fill out the form, they need the form or form instance. So what they will do is they'll click on, let's say a bank has a loan process or process for creating a new account or some sort of activity that the application is configured to trigger the creation of web form. So customer will basically initiate that process. So that process will trigger the creation of the form. And that form will be created from the web form configuration. This thing I'm going to explain or demonstrate using the Postman tool as well. So that instance is specific to the customer, meaning that at the time of creating instance, the application will collect customer data that is relevant for that particular application. They will collect the data from the database and put that information in the form of key value pairs and send as a payload to create an instance. Before we start with create instance API, I'd like to also mention about two other APIs, which are get forms and get form ID. So get form is useful in the sense that it returns the component information that we are going to use for pre-filling the instance when we are creating an instance. So here you could see applicant underscore name, applicant underscore email, applicant underscore SSN. These are the component names that we get these details using get forms or get form by ID API, the second one you could see here. And I haven't included these two APIs in this slide because the response is too large to be fitted here, but don't worry, I'm going to demonstrate these as well. So we have this create instance API. Now this create instance API have a body that looks like this. Like you could see client user ID, tags, expression offset, form values. So client user ID is basically, it's a unique identifier for a user that should originate from the client system. And this value can be anything your backend system would use to track individual form instance. It could be employee ID, email address, or any other ID. We don't enforce it to be unique, but we recommend that it should be unique. And then we have this expression of set. So this is the expiration of the instance that you want to specify, and the number you see here, there are the number of hours. For example, if you here you specify 240, so 240 is the 240 hours, which means the instance, like you won't be able to access the instance after 10 days or 240 hours, and the default value is 30 days, and the maximum it can go up to 999 days, 999 days. And here we have a form values. This is used for pre-filling the instance basically. So on the left hand side, these are the keys, which are the component name or the reference name that you see in DocuSign or Web Forms UI. And on the right hand side are the corresponding values that you want the form to be pre-filled with. And the response looks like this. So you do a post call on this endpoint account ID. You specify the form ID of which you want to create an instance. And the response is this JSON, which has an instance ID, then a form URL, then an instance token. So this instance token is they have an expiration of 5 minutes. You could see token expiration date time. So this is 5 minutes from the instant when the instance is created, which means like after 5 minutes, you won't be able to access this instance using the instance token. But the instance is still there because we specified 10 days for the expiration. So instance is still there. It's just that you need to refresh the token to access the same instance. So yeah, then we have this refresh token API. This refresh token API is basically used for refreshing the token that I just mentioned here. If your token is expired after 5 minutes, so you need to refresh the token to access the same instance again. All you need to do is make a post call to this endpoint. It has account ID, form ID, and instance ID. You need to specify the instance of which you want to refresh the token. And this is a response. You could see same instance ID, and then it's a form URL. And it gives a new instance token, which is valid for next 5 minutes. You could see from here. Now you would notice that this refresh token has instance ID in its path. So if this instance ID is not stored when a developer or when the application is creating a instance, we give you another chance to retrieve it using list instance API. So this is our list instance API. So here you could see it's a get call at this endpoint, which have account ID and form ID, and instances at the end. So it will return all the instances that were created for this particular form ID that resides in this account. And we have provided and you can also provide a client user ID as a query parameter, just in case you have let's say you have, when creating instance, you provided multiple or same client user ID for all the instances. In that case, it will be a bit tough to retrieve the instance for a customer, because the result will have all the instances. Then we leave it up to the developer discretion that they can use created date time to infer the instance, or maybe the status, because maybe the all other instance might be in submitted state. The instance which is in initiated state will be the instance that has not been submitted. Now, so going back to this slide, so we use like create instance refresh token API to create instance or refresh the token, and that returns a instance URL that we have seen here. This is a URL that is returned with the instance token. Now your application, they can render this instance using a couple of things. Like they can either make a get call to this form URL and they need to provide instance token as a hash parameter. So I'm going to demonstrate this as well. So this way they can render the instance, or they can also use DocuSign JS library to render that instance. The advantage of using library is like we have provided couple of functionality for the look and feel, and otherwise a developer, they can simply make a get call to render it, and then they can iframe it as well. Now, going back to this slide, once the instance is submitted, you can see here, end user, they submit the form to DocuSign after this is rendered. Once it is submitted, then application might want to know the instance, maybe the submitted data, or maybe the status of the instance. And we have a get instance API for that. So this get instance API takes 3 parameters in its path, like account ID, form ID, and the instance ID you want to retrieve the data for. And the result is, this is a response. You could see the status submitted. If the instance is submitted, you would see the envelope that is generated for that instance. And these are the form values that it represents the latest state of the instance. If the customer has not submitted, these represent the form values that was used for creating instance. If the instance is submitted, then these represent the updated values with the customer's data. Now, I'm going to demonstrate all these APIs. So we have, first of all, let me go ahead and show you this thing. So this is our DocuSign portal. I just logged into the DocuSign account. Here you could see we have a forms, and this is a web forms. And customer, they can create web form using a template, or they can also create a standalone form, which doesn't require a template. For simplicity purpose, let's use the same web form, this guy. So this is a form you could see. It has a couple of components inside it. To call or to use instance or any instance API, you need to first activate the form. I believe this form is already activated. Let's see. Yeah, this form is in active status. So now what I'll do is I'll make a get call. One thing I forgot to mention is when I go to it, edit form, you could see these are the API reference name that is used for pre-filling the instance, or we call it component name as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's call get form. So here my form ID is the form ID 7E443 that I believe is the same. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a get call. It returns me that form data, and you could see these are the published components. And if I go further down, these are individual components, component key, component name. These are the component names that are used for pre-filling the instance. So if I go to create instance here, I have a client user ID that I specify here. Client user ID is it's a mandatory required field. If I remove this client user ID, I think it's going to complain. Required field is missing. Let's put it back. And expiration offset 10 hours, form values. So let's create this instance. I have this instance created. this is a URL. By the way, this is a public URL, unless this is appended by this instance token. Let's go ahead and this. If you see here, there's no pre-filled data, right? But if I append instance token here, so there will be pre-filled data now. You could see all this information that I provided when creating instance. Here, these are the informations that I provided, right? So this instance is currently in initiated state, and this token that I'm using to render the instance will get expired after 5 minutes. In that case, what we need to do is we need to refresh the token, or let me just do this. This is I need to change the instance ID to refresh this token. Environments. Refresh token. Okay. I just click it, and so it's going to give me a new token that reference to the same instance. Let's go ahead and is it the right? Okay. You could see, so this is referring to the same instance with different instance token. Now, let's go ahead and fill this data. Okay. So I'm going to submit this data. Okay. Continue. Okay, now going back to get instance API. Let's see how that data looks like. So if you could see, this data is submitted, so the status is submitted, and there's a corresponding envelope that is generated. You could see these are the values that I provided. So this instance is submitted with these form values. So that's how the application knows that the data or the form is submitted. And by the way, we also provide a event, like if you use DocuSign JS library, there's a completion event that is triggered, and you can make a hook on top of that. Now we have this list instances API that I talked about. So this returns all the instances for a particular form, and you can also filter by client user ID. Let's call it. So you could see it has 1, 2, 3, 4 instances, 5 instances, probably 6. Okay. I used this form in the past as well, and you could see like all the, it doesn't return the form values, it just gives you the overview of the instance, like the status and the envelope ID. and also the client user ID. And there's a API called list forms. This API is used for listing all the forms, just like list instances API is used for listing instances. This is used for listing all the forms for within an account. And this is helpful in the sense that when customer, they want to see all the forms in their account, and this is a paginated API, so you need to specify the next URL here in the page size as well in the query parameter. I think, yeah, that's all about the demo. Thank you all for joining us today in this webinar. I believe we have covered some fundamental concepts, and I hope you found this information valuable. Now we'll open this floor for Q&A.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Hitesh, Helen, and Pranav. Super appreciate all your wonderful presentation and demos here. Cole, I noticed we have a number of questions still pending in the Q&A, and one of the first ones we had was actually a raised hand from Brett. Brett, I'm going to allow you to talk, so I'm going to do that and then ask you to unmute yourself. And you can talk. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working. And my apologies, Brett, that doesn't seem to be working. I'm not sure if you're trying to unmute or not, but if you're unable to do that, if you could just drop your question into the Q&A box, then we'll get to you as soon as we see that. All right, so Cole, I think I'll turn it over to you to kind of manage and go through maybe some of the common questions.
Yeah, sounds good. It looks like there's a few being answered. I guess a really quick one logistically, the recording availability, Melissa, I believe that'll be sent over
Yep.
eventually.
Yeah, thanks. We'll be sending the recording and the resources to everyone who attended the webinar about a week following. So keep your eyes peeled. You should see that by next Tuesday.
Sounds good. And then it looks like if we just start from the top down on the ones not currently being answered, we have one from, can you have a field in web forms that opens if more than one option is selected in a drop-down question? So for example, if they select option 1 or option 2, I would like a field to open. Right now I'm using formula. So it almost sounds like maybe conditional field visibility. Pranav, Hitesh, or Helen, are you aware if there is that conditional logic with web forms?
Yeah, Gustavo, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, no, that's certainly possible. Yeah, so you can set up a conditional rule. So based on any number of selections from a radio or checkbox or drop down, you can set the visibility for any other field or actually entire pages of content within the web form. So yeah, you don't need to use a formula field on the web form to do that.
Awesome. Thank you. It looks like another one here is setting up visibility rules or provide some documentation related to create within web forms. So the visibility rules, if there is something specific with web forms, feel free to jump in. Maybe this might have to do with field visibility, but does anyone have input?
So yeah, let's talk a little bit. So I think I can interpret visibility rules a couple ways. So there's just what we would call sort of conditional rules or conditional logic. There's pretty good documentation on the web form side around how you would configure a rule, again, to show and hide fields within the web form, or as I said, entire pages of content as well. There are also what are called document visibility rules. That's a e-signature concept. If that's what's being referred to here, I will also say that, again, those rules pretty well documented as far as how you set up document visibility and e-signature. And web forms is fully compatible with document visibility rules set up in e-signature. So both can be configured independently, rules around field visibility within the web form and rules around document visibility within e-signature.
Awesome, thank you. I see another one that seems similar to kind of those conditional. Can DocuSign integrate if/then formulas where if a contract field is not populated, they must fill it in? The example there is a tax ID is required for contracts, but typically they might have that in advance. If it's not populated, the customer would need to input only if blank, and it would be required. So again, I think more towards that conditionals.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can certainly set up a rule to do that. Yeah. So yeah, based on whether a field is filled in or not filled in, show or hide other fields within the form. Yeah.
Okay. And then one that we could maybe even speak towards live for multiple signers with a web form. Is that supported? Is it suggested? What might that look like if there might be more than one signer?
Yeah, so today only one user, the first signer, essentially gets to interact with the web form. So it's really built primarily for that use case where most of the data that you're collecting is going to come from that one user. Now that doesn't preclude, once the form is submitted, that's when an envelope is generated for signature. You could still have additional signers within that flow, except that all of those additional signers would basically land directly on the envelope, right? They'll land on the document to sign. So it can still capture some data there, right? Just as you would today with regular signing. But those additional signers don't see the full web form experience. Now that is something that we're going to be working on probably towards the latter half of the year. We want to expand the functionality of web forms to additional signers, but it's just going to take us a little bit more time to get there.
Okay. And then as far as availability goes, so are web forms currently available in both developer and production accounts?
Yes, it should be available in all demo accounts. If it's not, it's enough to just request it through support. In production, it is an add-on, so it is something that we're selling. It's going to go live next week as far as the ability to purchase that additional add-on, but that should be available shortly.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, so then I guess on that regard too, for a lot of these questions, if you do have a developer account, you should see the web forms. You can go in and try to start building out those general potential use cases. And if you don't have a developer account, you can create one by going to developers.docusign.com. And at the top right, you'll see an option to create a developer account. But another one I see here is getting input on actually building these out. Do web forms typically require custom development or professional services?
So the functionality without APIs, I would say, should be fairly self-service. So we don't recommend or we don't think there's a need for professional services. I think typically with an API integration, we do recommend professional services. Just because it is a more technical implementation. So yeah, I would say if you're not doing APIs, it's probably fine, but with APIs, it certainly would help.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Let me go through and look at a new one that just came in a second ago. Can the web form additional CC and sequence before signer can add additional document/form for signer to sign? I'm not sure I totally, let me try to see if I can make sense of that. Can the web form CC and sequence?
I can try to interpret this. So you can have any set of roles as you would today, and when you set up a template, you can have roles where users can come in and determine additional signers. They can make certain modifications to the to that flow. So you'd have to test it out in terms of your specific kind of use case, just to make sure it meets it. But in general, I would say yes, you should be able to insert users through that flow that can make certain modifications to the envelope once that envelope is generated. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks. Yeah, and if there's anything we can elaborate on that one, feel free to post whatever that additional elaboration might be in the Q&A box. And then I see another one. Can DocuSign calculate payment terms? Customer cost is 12,000. If they select 12 months payment terms, the calculation would be 1,000 a month. If they select 24 months, the calculation would be 500 a month. That might be more under the control of whatever your application building out the integration might be. So it might need to dynamically create those numbers of fields in custom code of whatever your language might be that you're building out that integration. DocuSign, the main things would be that conditional logic, but as far as like dynamically creating X number of fields on a envelope, that would likely need to be done post envelope creation. But if anyone has any other input, feel free to jump in there.
It also sounds a lot like a formula field that's available in eSign today, right? You can do a calculation like what's shown here. We do not have equivalent formula fields in web forms yet. That is something that we want to look at. Now, what I would say is, yes, ideally you'd have the equivalent functionality within the web form to do a calculation, and then perhaps even use that calculation to drive some rules and conditional logic. But you can still have the formula field on the template, right? So that at signing, that the formula is going to do its thing, right, and do that calculation. So you can use the web form to collect all the data that you need, and then use the formula field on the envelope to actually do the calculation. So it's kind of a temporary solution until we have full support for formula fields within the web form itself.
Okay. And then as far as going live with web forms, is there any general recommendations for that regarding those like 20 API requests, or what might the input be for that?
Yeah, so we follow the same go live process as eSign and any other API integration today. It's not ideal in that it requires you to make 20 API calls that are eSign API calls, not web forms API calls. And really all that it's doing is just promoting your integration key from a demo environment into our production environment. So that's really, that's really why that go live requirement is there. It's not really specific to web forms per se. Now, if you already have an app that's configured and set up, you can certainly leverage that already existing app to build your web forms integration. So you don't need a separate app altogether to do that.
Awesome, and thank you. It looks like there might be a few new ones as well. Can the web form additional CC in sequence before the signer? Can add additional
I think that's
document?
I was trying to.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it is. Yeah, gotcha.
I'll just I'll answer a little bit in text here as well.
Perfect. And then let me see. I did see a few that came up earlier on, so it might be worthwhile just to talk through it verbally here. Power forms versus web forms. When might you choose one over the other?
So web forms, really the key difference is the user experience, right? So in Power Forms, let's say you need to collect data from your user. they'll provide a name and email, or you can pre-populate those, and they'll land essentially on a document, right? It's effectively a PDF form that you're asking them to fill out, right? And it's our belief certainly that solves a lot of use cases, but it is not probably the ideal experience that you'd want to present to users, particularly when you're asking for a lot of data from them. So it's a lot more processing they have to do when they're just landing on a document. Sometimes the spacing is kind of frustrating as well. Things are kind of crunched up in that document view. So web forms really intended to be a dedicated, dynamic and responsive user experience for really focusing on collecting that data in an optimal way, guiding users through that flow, right, by using conditional logic. And then once you've got all the data, they can review it, submit it. They basically land on that document view still to sign. But at that point, we even recommend just make everything read-only at that point, because you've already collected the data, they already reviewed it. All they really need to do once they land on that document is just sign, right? So it's really intended to streamline that user experience, help capture that data faster, right? And with fewer errors as well, because they don't have to process as much.
Perfect, thank you. And I see a new one just came in regarding attachments. Can you specify an attachment to be a certain size or a specific type on the web form?
So we don't yet have support for attachments, actually something we're working on right now. So I think that's still TBD. I think it's certainly a good suggestion if you find a way to limit types and sizes, but that's not something that we support today.
Okay, good to know, and thank you. It looks like that might be, unless there's any new ones coming through, all of the questions from the chat.
I think that's about it. So thank you so much, Cole and Gustav. We appreciate all of your help today, answering all the questions. Great session, everyone. Let's go ahead and go to the resources slide. So next slide, please. Thank you. All right. So for those of you whose questions we haven't addressed, or if you think of something else, you can reach out to us at developers@DocuSign.com, and this team will follow up with you after today's webinar. You can also post questions in stackoverflow.com and tag them with DocuSign API for a community response, or you can join us for one of our upcoming webinars. February 27th, we have our next API office hours at 10 a.m. live from Seattle. We also have a webinar on March 6th at 8 p.m. Pacific time, so that's in the evening. That'll be live from Australia. You can ask us anything during those. And then you can see here all of our links to Web Forms API. We'll share these links in the follow-up email along with the recording about a week from today, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And then if you could also be sure to take the survey that you see at the end of the webinar. We would super appreciate your feedback, how we did today, and what you'd like to see for future webinars. Let's see. Finally, I would like to thank Hitesh and Pranav for leading the webinar, Cole, Gustav, and Helen for chiming in with all the great questions. Thank you so much. You all did a fabulous job, and we want to thank all of you, our audience, for attending today and on all of the great questions. Have a great remainder of the day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.